My name is Jesse Garcia. I'm the chairman of the Brookhaven Republican Committee, and it's my great honor to stand here and welcome each and every one of you with these great individuals behind me, and certainly with our next congressman from the 1st District, Lee Zeldin. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge a number of dignitaries that are with them, some partners of ours. Mason Haas, my partner, chairman of the Riverhead Republican Committee. Give him a round of applause. He's around here somewhere. Bill Ellis, chairman of the Smithtown Republican Committee. Billy, give him that chair, buddy. Give him that chair. What do you think? What's your moniker? Lee for Lee, that's right. Right. Good chairman here in Brookhaven from the Conservative Party, Frank Perfetta. District Court Judge and soon-to-be County Court Judge, Phil Goldlist. We're just about to get started. Look at this energy in this crowd. Listen, I want to tell you something. Instead of protecting us from foreign enemies like ISIS, maybe fixing our economy so we can have some jobs, giving our veterans and our U.S. servicemen the benefits they've earned and certainly the resources they need, Tim Bishop was more worried about paying some kids from Bronx and Brooklyn to come out here and protest. Let's let Tim Bishop know there's change coming to the New York First Amendment. Let's let him hear it all the way in D.C. Because nowhere in the country is the energy stronger than it is right here for Lee Zeldin for Congress. Waiting for my cue right now. Trust me, I know that each and every one of you are thinking one other thing. New York Giants kickoff, so am I. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Before we get started, you hear from true American heroes. It would be my honor to start with the Pledge of Allegiance delivered by one of our own, Colonel Thomas Kilmartin, U.S. Army. Yeah!
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah. And now, if we please remain standing for just a few seconds, John Kreutz will be leading us in our national anthem, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose stars and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare the bombs were singing in air. They through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I lived on Park Vista. It's a small neighborhood cul-de-sac. Not a very big house, but we didn't know it at the time. I was very, very fortunate to earn a 4-year full Army scholarship. There was just no way my parents would have been able to send me to school. That was an impossibility, and I certainly wasn't able to save that money. My dad served from 53 to 57. My brother served 8 years in the Navy. It's just something that men in our family have always done, and I had a lot of tradition to draw from there. Was entrusted the mantle of command to deploy to Iraq, to be in charge of a 1,000-soldier task force, Task Force 122 Infantry, which I had the privilege to command and lead for a year from 2003 to 2004. Be in charge of America's sons and a few of her daughters. The decisions that I made were crucial to their survival and to the defeat of the enemy. Without question, my proudest achievement in my military service was to be one of the units involved with the hunt and capture of Saddam Hussein. America is important. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. So if you're going to lay down your life or be willing to, and I nearly laid mine down several times for this document, inalienable rights that are not granted by government. What are we talking about? We're talking about the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, the right to defend yourself and bear arms, the rights to your property and to your liberty. These are inalienable rights. They are God-given, and no government can grant them, and no government can take them away, and we've lost our way. And now it's time for good people to do something. There's no problem out there that we as a people can't fix, but it will never happen if good people are not willing to risk their lives, their reputations, and their treasure to try to make our country what it once was. And we have to have those kind of people. If we don't, sure, we can get somebody of some political party in that office, but what kind of bench of leadership are we setting for the future? It is time for people to lay aside their comforts and begin to take this country back. I will be that kind of leader, and we need a lot more of them in Washington.
Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm, a rousing welcome to a true American hero and a new member of Congress this year, Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Russell.
Well, it's going to be great to serve on that bench with Lee Zeldin. What do you think? I want to tell you a small story briefly. Among the soldiers serving with us the night that we got Saddam Hussein were Ian Weichel and Mark Payne. Ian was part of the recon troop that was in the orchard where the farms were, one particular farm, obviously, where Saddam was pulled out of. And Mark Payne coordinated information as a battle captain for the commander of the operation. And little did these two soldiers know when they were roommates at West Point that they would be on the same field of battle making history that night. Returning to Iraq a year later, about 15 months later, and each of those captains having worked for me, but now in charge of their own companies, I got news in April of 2006 that Ian Weichel was killed in action while leading his troops in battle. So those of us that knew him, we paid our respects by going to Arlington National Cemetery. 6 months later, after suffering a concussion from a roadside bomb and ignoring that, Mark Payne was killed by enemy fire while leading his troops on a combat operation. So I made another trip to Arlington National Cemetery to pay my respects. And those of you that have been to Arlington, you know that they bury our brother warriors in Section 60. And as we followed Mark's caisson out to Section 60, as they receive soldiers, they just lay them in a row and then they make a new one and weave it back until they fill a portion and then they move on to the next one. As we followed Mark's caisson out to his final resting place, we were stunned to see that he was being laid at the feet of Ian Weichel. Roommates in battle, brothers, and now together forever. After the burial, I wandered around our nation's capital, trying to mentally process a great number of concerns. At that time, as today, politicians on both sides of the aisle thumped their chests about the hopelessness of our cause and the worthlessness of our service. You had the leader of the Senate declaring the war lost, while we had our brothers and sisters in the middle of the fight. And everywhere I turned, the air was heavy with melancholy prophecy about the wrong direction that our country had taken. And I decided to look at monuments, big marble, beautiful structures with bold things carved in them, wondering if perhaps they hadn't been set up there for fools like me that still believe in the greatness of our country. And as I walked across the Capitol lawn, I saw a brick, concrete and glass structure, and I wandered in it, and I was amazed by what I saw. The world's first airplane, the Wright Flyer. Stunning when you see it and you think of how it changed everything. It allowed me to speak in a conference last night in San Antonio and be in Georgia Saturday and be here tonight, motivating you to vote for Lee Zeldin. Amazing structure. And yet as I walked around the Wright Flyer, I was introduced to a couple of groups that day. They explained on kiosk how it was made, and they were talking about the cynics and the critics, telling the Wright brothers it would never fly. Looking at it, it was hard to believe it ever did, a tangle of wire and canvas and wood. Hanging above me, coming out of the gallery, there was a sturdy-looking craft that had a bold title blazoned on the cowl, Spirit of St. Louis. And what struck me about this craft is it had no forward-looking window, just a forward-looking pilot at the controls. If you go back and read the accounts of the day, there they were, the cynics and critics, with such encouraging news like, "You fool, you're going to die just like all of the others." What makes you think, as a male pilot, you've got any more experience than these World War aces that have lost their lives in the attempt? You can't do it alone. You'll never stay awake. You'll never get off the ground with the weight of all of that gasoline. Rounding the corner to examine spacecraft, I pondered the physics of what to me looked like aluminum foil on the Apollo 18 lander and wondered how it could sustain life in outer space. How was it that we in this country found Americans foolish enough to believe that you could be blasted atop a rocket containing 2,000 metric tons of fuel sent into space, and it would break apart by design? It would send you to the moon, and the last two stages would break apart, meet on opposite ends, reconnect, astronauts would crawl through, and it would separate again. A portion of it would land upright on the moon. Men would get out, plant a flag, pick up a few rocks, hop back in, go back up, find this other craft over the expanse of the moon, redo that drill, and because of somebody's theory, some scientist probably with pocket protectors and pins and all of that, said if you slingshot around the moon, you'll head back to the Earth at thousands of miles an hour, and don't worry about the speed. The fiery atmosphere will slow you down. And we'll put little asbestos plates on the bottom, and that will protect you. And as you come hurling through the sky at hundreds of miles an hour, parachutes will deploy, and you'll land in the Pacific Ocean. A helicopter come find you. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? But that's exactly what we in this great country of ours did. I'll never forget, as a boy, my dad waking me up and said, "Son, get up, I want you to see this. You'll remember it the rest of your life." And boy, was he right. As I watched Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walk down a ladder and plant that flag for mankind. And this country did it. And we did it with less technology than I now carry on my phone. But to go back and read the accounts of the day, there they were, the cynics and the critics, with such words like, "What about the war on poverty? What about the domestic issues we have here at home? Why are we wasting these billions of dollars on a frivolous race with the Russians? Blah, blah, blah. I left the National Air and Space Museum, as melancholy as I was and as discouraged as I was. I left inspired, because it dawned on me that day, that very day, that this country has never been built on the counsel and labor of cynics and critics. Cynics and critics, soldiers like Lee Zeldin, and Alan West, and I, and many of you, we're sick of them. We've had a belly full of them. Every single monumental task that this nation has asked of our warriors since 9/11 has been accomplished. Overthrow the Taliban government, overthrown. Kill Osama bin Laden, shot between the eyes by the Navy SEALs, not the President of the United States. Defeat the Iraqi army, overthrow the Ba'athist government, defeated, overthrown. Kill or capture Saddam Hussein, pulled out of a hole, turned over to his own people, tried like the criminal he was, and hung at the end of a rope. And we've done it all. We've done it all with the prattle and obstructions of liberals, progressives, cynics, and critics telling us it was all some big mistake. What a bucket of nonsense. You want to see what a mistake looks like? Look what happens when America pulls away from its responsibilities worldwide. What can we learn from our current war veterans? The same thing we learned from you older veterans that are here tonight. There are still things worth fighting for in the United States of America. America has never been built on the counsel and labor of cynics and critics. There are Americans, and there's millions of them, I see them all over the country, that still get it. They know how to sacrifice. They know the difference between what is good and what is evil, and aren't afraid to call it that. Who is a threat and who is harmless, and whether to live free or just quit and watch this country die. I've had people ask me, they said, why do you want to go to Washington? I don't want to go to Washington, but our country is in trouble and we have to take it back. And people like Lee Zeldin are going to do that. But what do the rest of us do? We have to sacrifice along with our soldiers. Like what? Sacrifice doubt. Sacrifice anxiety. Sacrifice cynicism. Sacrifice any notion that causes us to come home from a decade of war to see this country turned over to the divisive, the self-indulgent, and the visionless. As visionary as we conservatives claim to be, and lovers of liberty, will make little headway if our only answers are mere sideline snipes about what's wrong with this country. It's time that we pick up the plow and show the American people what's right with this country and get back to work. Any soldier knows that you make use of the time that you have and the resources you have. Lee Zeldin didn't snivel when he was outspent 10-1. He got it done. Just like we can take this country back. You don't quit until the mission is accomplished. And if we want to honor those, the true heroes of any war, men like Ian and Mark and countless others, and all of you that have served, that you can name their names, because as long as we have breath, we will remember them. They will never come home. They will never know the joys of marriage and raising their children, or living to the ripe old age to see their grandchildren while living in the freedom that their lives and sacrifice purchased for all of us. Then we must rebuild the country that they died for. Now, some of our lives is how we invest them in other people. And you tonight have a chance to invest. It's not about money. It's not about political machinery. It's not about any of those things. I saw it in my own race in Oklahoma. Outspent, but not outmaneuvered. We can take this country back because you still own the vote. You still own our republic, and we have to take it back. How do you do that? You start by helping with grassroots volunteerism, just like you're doing here tonight. Many of you have made calls, you've knocked countless doors. Go to your social media, go to your emails, go to your phones. One person out there could literally be 100 votes influenced on election day. That's what it's going to take to put this great warrior into office. He needs you. He cannot do it by himself. And we, the people, we have a responsibility to defend this great nation, not just the warriors that have taken up arms, but all of us, and give of our talents and efforts like you are tonight to preserve our freedom. And may you continue to be such people. And as you face the wind and look to the future, you will always have the naysayers, the people around you trying to pull you down because they're taking counsel of their fears, and they want to pull you down with them so that they'll feel better about their pathetic, sedentary lives. Don't listen to them. They have nothing to say that we want to hear. And as you face that wind and ignore their calls, those around you taking counsel of their fears, ignore them, take the risks, lead, work, achieve. And remember, it will fly. Keep the faith. Don't quit. God bless you all. Let's elect Lee Zeldin for Congress. Round of applause for Lieutenant Colonel Steve Russell. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce you, a true American leader, someone who shook up Washington, continues to shake up a country. He is principled, he's a patriot, he's someone who leads from the front, and someone who still protects the true values of our nation, our Constitution, and certainly our great warriors, our veterans and members of the armed forces. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a true American hero, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West.
It's really hard for a southern boy from Georgia to make his mouth work right to say that. Hey look, this is an important and a critical time. The fact that you are here tonight, it lets me know that you are concerned about the future. You're concerned about the legacy that you pass on to subsequent generations, because this is the challenge for each and every one of us. On September the 17th, 1787, when the ratification of our Constitution was over, and Benjamin Franklin walked out of the Constitution Hall, he was met by a Philadelphia socialite, a woman by the name of Mrs. Powell. And Mrs. Powell turned to him and said, "Well, doctor, what is it that we have? Do we have a republic or do we have a monarchy?" Franklin looked at her and said, very simple, "You have a republic if you can keep it." The fact of you being here tonight, you understand that you have a republic, and it is your responsibility to keep this republic, to keep it safe, and pass it on, because that is a part of our genetic code. That is a part of the DNA of being a United States American citizen. Now, I heard that there were some preachers and a rabbi who were kind of taken aback at my being here on Long Island. I would not portend to tell a preacher what to say in his pulpit, nor a rabbi. But this is what really we must understand. When someone says to me that they are upset about me being here because I said that the Democrat Party is creating a 21st century economic plantation in our inner city communities, I grew up in the inner city. I know what is happening in my community. The failure of progressive socialist economic policies are the reason why we cannot have an American dream for all Americans. What is going on in Detroit? What is going on in Chicago? What is going on in Philadelphia? What is going on in my neighborhood in Atlanta? Thank you, sir. And they always have been running it. We must be proud. We must be resolute. We must be courageous in speaking the truth to those who refuse to want to hear the truth. And don't worry about them calling you names. I get called plenty of names. But the bottom line is this. At the end of the day, if you are able to look at yourself in the mirror and know that you maintained your character, know that you maintain your honor and your integrity and you spoke the truth, then who cares about the names that they are calling you? What is happening in our country, where people who were once on full-time equivalent employment are now working 2 to 3 part-time jobs. You look at what is happening in our grocery stores, and Americans, middle-income Americans, families are struggling to fill up a grocery cart because of the rise in costs of food commodities, milk, eggs, meat, bread, whatever you name it. Well, it's because our government realizes that these economic policies are failing. So they have to print money to try to have an artificial economy. And you all know what happens when you print your own money. It devalues your dollar and it raises the prices. And when you understand that wages are being depressed, we're putting our American citizens in such a harmful position. When you think about, look at the gasoline prices. And folks have forgotten that in January of 2009, the average price of gasoline in the United States of America was $1.89. What is it today in Long Island? We cannot believe that that is the new normal. We cannot believe that we have something like the Keystone XL pipeline and we refuse to do it because we have an intransigent ideologue that sits in the White House. America should be producing, America should be consuming, America should be exporting its oil and natural gas and energy resources. That's the reason why Vladimir Putin is doing what he is doing to Europe by taking over Ukraine, because they're afraid of him shutting off the pipeline. If we had people that were focused on solutions, they would open up the pipelines and they would be sending oil and natural gas to Europe and to all over, so that the despots, the dictators, the autocrats, and the theocrats would not hold us hostage, so we would not have to send our men and women over to foreign lands to try to protect them. We could have our own resources right here in the United States. You know, there are people in this country, they don't accept the challenge of Benjamin Franklin. They don't believe that we have a republic that we should keep. They don't even believe that we have a border that needs to be secure. They think that everyone from all over the world should be part of a dream. Well, guess what? Our children are part of a dream. The dream of America that we should pass on to them. And I'm sorry that people don't have the opportunity to be born and brought here to the United States of America, but it has to be about our children first, not any other children. Right here in your neighborhoods, how many thousands of illegal immigrant children have been dumped into your schools? And where is your congressman speaking out about that? What does he say about the $761 million across the United States of America that it will cost to have these kids showing up in the schools? Where are they standing up for your children who have to go to school with people that have gray hair? Are you crazy? Some of these people, we can't even validate their ages. Some of these people, we can't even validate their medical history. All for a political agenda. We are exposing our American children to something that is deadly, not just for their health, but for their future and their education. This is why we have to change what is going on in Washington, D.C. And this is why you have great Americans that continue to honor their oath, like Steve Russell and Lee Zeldin. That's why they need to be there. But they need to be there for something even greater. We need to have more military conservatives. We need to have more veterans. 40 to 45 years ago, you had 73% of people on Capitol Hill that had worn a uniform, that had taken that special oath that says, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. And just like Lincoln said at Gettysburg, they were willing to make the last full measure of devotion to honor that oath. The people in Washington, D.C. take an oath and they could care less. We've got to change that and send people that honor that oath, honor their commitment to each and every one of you. Send people to Washington, D.C. that understand that ISIS, they ain't a JV team, brother. It's an enemy, and they need to be destroyed. They don't need to be managed. They don't need to be dealt with later. They don't need you to think about it while you're out playing golf.
Bring home Sergeant
Battlefield
Tamarisi!
calculus. How is it that it would take the United States of America 3 years to kill 10,000 guys? In Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we wiped out Saddam's army in 96 hours. That's what happens when you don't have a commander-in-chief in the United States White House. Lee Zeldin's been on the battlefield. Steve Russell has been on the battlefield. And they will be on Armed Services Committee. They will be on the right type of committees to make sure we're not decimating our military forces. We have a United States Army that is now going to 1940s level. We have a United States Navy that is the smallest Navy since 1917. We have a United States Air Force that is the oldest and smallest fleet since we created the modern day United States Air Force. And we have a United States Marine Corps that is at pre-World War I levels. How are we going to fight, secure, and defend ourselves against an enemy who has said that they're at war with us, an enemy who has beheaded 2 Americans in the last couple of weeks, and yet we have a president that sits around and says, on the greatest stage that the world has ever known, in the White House, that I have no plan. Well, we have a plan. The first plan is to take back the Senate, expand the majority in the House of Representatives, and when your butt is gone, Mr. President, you're going to get a conservative Republican in the White House.
You need to run for the White House! Yes!
I'm running for my health tomorrow morning.
Colonel, what about Sergeant Tamarisi?
Sergeant Tamarisi should be right here. But that's what happens when you don't have someone that believes in the military, someone who has never served. But when you look at Lee Zeldin's 2 daughters, that's why Lee Zeldin is running. Not just for his 2 daughters, but for your sons, for your daughters, for your grandchildren. That's why Lee Zeldin is running. That's why Steve Russell is running. Because they realize that the oath of service that they took does not have a statute of limitations. And they are willing to continue to give you that last full measure of devotion, even out of uniform. That's why I'm here. I don't care about the name calling. I know that we're on the side of that which is right. And anytime they want to come out and protest or do all of these consternations, it's all because they know one simple thing. We instill fear in them. When they see that flag that says, don't tread on me, when they see the American flag, when they see you standing up for principle, when they see you standing up accepting the challenge of Benjamin Franklin, that you will keep this republic, that makes them very afraid. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to present to each and every one of you the next congressman from New York's Congressional District Number 1, Major in the United States Army Reserve, State Senator from the Empire State, my friend, a great American, Lee Zeldin.
America, the land of freedom and home of patriots like Lee Zeldin, who's committed to keeping our country free. Lee Zeldin's a father of twins who's passionate about protecting his and your children's future and ensuring we're handing their generation even greater opportunities than we enjoyed. Lee Zeldin's a proud veteran who served his country in Iraq and serves today as a major in the Army Reserves. Lee Zeldin's a public servant who, as state senator, fought to protect our hard-earned money and lowered the tax burden on hard-working families and small businesses. Above all, Lee Zeldin's a fighter who wants to go to Washington and end disastrous job-killing Obamacare and Washington's misguided Common Core, and return decisions regarding your family's health and the education of your children back to where they belong, to you. Lee Zeldin for Congress, because it's time for new leadership.
Ladies and gentlemen, what more is there to say? Your next Congressman, Lee Zeldin!
So I have to follow Alan West and Steve Russell? I'm in the back, I'm hearing all the applause, I'm thinking to myself, I should have went first. You know, we have an all-volunteer army. Everyone who serves now, men and women, they're there because they want to. And I would have to admit, many of you may not realize this, there's a lot of stuff that happens while you serve in the military where we don't get volunteers too easily. They have tasks that we might be, painting rocks, stacking them, counting them, raking them. And what you do as a leader is you'll pull out a few people from the crowd, PFC Jackson, PFC Brown, PFC Mullins, raise your hand, raise them high. And as soon as their hands go up, they said, congratulations, you just volunteered to paint rocks. A few weeks ago, I was having an event. Someone asked me, what is the most surprising thing that you've encountered during this race? And I hadn't really thought about that, so I paused for a second or two. I said, you know what? There has been so many people who have been willing to spend time away from their family and friends, on the streets, knocking on thousands of doors, making calls, people who put their nets out. We had a tough primary. There was over $4 million spent against us. But thanks to all of you, we won by almost 25 points. The good news is that if we asked you to raise your hand and volunteer for these last 8 weeks, your hands would go up easily. We told you exactly what we had to do, because there are a lot more doors to be knocked on, a lot of more calls to be made, and we're going to need your help. And the good news is, all of you know that this is a lot more important than going out and painting rocks. The direction our country is heading under the people we have right now in Washington cause us such deep concern that we are here even during the first night of Giants football. Because we know how much is at stake. We have people in Washington, both Republicans and Democrats, there's plenty of blame to go around. There are people down there who lack the personal courage to make really tough decisions that will actually fix our country and put us on a path that we can be greatly proud of again. There's a lot of contrast between my opponent and I. He's been here 12 years. I would argue that those 12 years have been quite ineffective. I don't know how many want to take a guess of how many bills he's gotten passed and signed into law. The answer is 4. Renaming post offices. I've been in Albany for 2 terms, 4 years. I've had 48 bills that I'm very proud of get passed and signed into law. Bills that were reducing fees, cutting taxes, allowing our craft breweries to grow across the state, create more good-paying jobs, consolidating licenses. When I campaigned for office, and many of you were walking door to door with me, you were putting your own faith, your neighbors, the trust that they have in you, saying that if you let this man to the New York State Senate, this is what he would do, fighting for you, fighting for us, the taxpayers. And when we were running again in 2012, because once we got elected, we obsessed with fulfilling our commitments. Our campaign slogan was, promises made, promises kept. And you know what? I think one of the reasons why the American politician is the least popular job in the United States of America is because of the people who come asking for your vote, accomplish nothing, and then they come back 2 years or 4 years later with the best excuse that they could think of. How if you give them another term in office, they promise that they'll get it done next time. I was on the phone with a reporter, and I was talking about how there's all this dysfunction in Washington, all this fiscal insanity plaguing our nation's capital. Republicans and Democrats not talking to each other or getting anything done. There's been one federal budget since 2007. He said the problem isn't with this is a reporter, by the way. The problem isn't with Republicans fighting with Democrats. The problem is with Republicans fighting with Republicans. I found myself in a debate with a reporter over the phone as to what the reality is. In some respects, we are up against the Democrats and what they stand for. But in many respects, the media is playing along. You know, there's over 40 jobs bills in the United States Senate right now that Harry Reid is refusing to bring to the floor for a vote. There are over 300 bills that have passed the House, sitting in the Senate. This president's version of compromise is for him to get it 100% his way all the time. And that's unacceptable to me. And I know it is to you. I spoke at CPAC in March. I spoke about personal courage. The 7 Army values. The acronym is leadership. It's loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. I spoke about personal courage because we have people in office, both Republicans and Democrats, who prioritize their own re-election, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth on the list, that they refuse to make any tough decisions that might cost them votes because they like their jobs, their power, their perk, their prestige. This race is about not just personal courage, but living all of those values and the leaders that you look for to elect. It's about duty. It's about the duty to, as an elected official, to be able to grow our economy and create good-paying private sector jobs. About fighting for our veterans who fought for us, repealing and replacing Obamacare. It's about securing our borders and protecting America's interests overseas. And I see a lot of children here. And the fights in Washington, no matter how much the incumbent denies it, I support a quality education for our kids. I support higher standards, but Common Core is not the answer. We need to elect problem solvers, not backbenchers. And in the case of our incumbent, he isn't even a backbencher. He sits behind the backbenchers. After 12 years in office, the slogan for the next 8 weeks, the motivation hopefully that you take from here tonight is that it's time to term limit Tim. We cannot keep re-electing the same people over and over and ever expect anything to change. Do you want to change Washington? Yeah! Well, let's change our congressman. I have a great team here with me tonight, signing up folks who are willing to volunteer, who are able to knock on doors, willing to come down to our offices to make calls. We have offices in Centereach, in Riverhead, in Center Moriches, in Smithtown. We need your help, and we're going to win because we have all of you. And Tim Bishop is not scared of me. But I'll tell you what, he is frightened to death of all of you. So let's get this done. 8 weeks to go, there's so much at stake. America's future's at stake, and our kids as well. God bless all of you for being here tonight. Go Giants, and God bless America.
Ladies and gentlemen, we know you're committed to your country. Let me hear you if you're committed to your country. I know by being here you're committed to Lee Zeldin. Let me hear you if you're committed to Lee Zeldin. Show everybody, show the nation you're committed to Lee Zeldin. Don't leave here without a lawn sign. Don't leave here without signing up in the back to walk communities, to make phone calls. Ladies and gentlemen, the only way Lee Zeldin gets to Washington is because each and every one of you. God bless you.